Well, good evening, everyone. Here we are, Michael Theology ASMR here, and we're going to take a break from hardcore doctrinal issues or questions and instead diverge into an interesting biblical story to show you how God can work in unexpected ways at unexpected times. I don't like the way this hat is. There. It's kind of hiding under there. Okay, good. Now I'm a little less hiding. I like to hide because I'm a bit self-conscious all the time. Anyway, guys, I have my notes here. This is a story about God's providence, how he uses human nature and how he uses even bad things to bring about a good result, how he uses his sovereignty in conjunction with our free will to bring about a desired purpose or end point. And this story is particularly interesting because it's got intrigue and suspense. It's got murder and a villain and conspiracy and power players at the highest levels. It's got a beauty pageant. It's got envy and greed and a surprise twist at the end. What could be better? It's one of the most interesting stories in the Bible. And it's all true, not fiction. We know this even from extra biblical accounts outside of the Bible. But in any case, a couple of interesting facts about the book of Esther that we're going to look at. This might take 2 sessions because I'll put you to sleep in the first one and in the second one. I think it's about more than an hour of material, but in any case, in this book, God's name is never mentioned or referenced. It's the only book of the Bible of all 66 books where God's name is not mentioned. However, you can still see from the implications and the literary implications of what's being said that God is in the background, overruling with a sovereign hand to use what's happening. Now let's set the scene first of all. This is the Persian Empire, okay? And the Persian Empire was one of the greatest and largest empires of that day. It extended, let's see if we can get our globe where you can see it here. Can I do this and follow my own finger? It extended from Egypt, Africa, through Arabia, up around the Black Sea, Turkey in this area, and all the way out to India. And so it was at the time one of the greatest empires in global history. And it was ruled at this time by King Xerxes. This was this was from 486 BC to 465 BC. So he ruled for 21 years. Let's take a look. I'm going to turn on the graphics here so we can follow along with our story. Hello, graphics. There we are. Okay, I will fade out some, but hopefully we can get the true colors. Will zoom in more on that. There, I think we got that a little bit. Okay, so there's a rendering of King Xerxes. Where's my handy dandy pen? And he looked something like this. This is a monument from that era of a couple of the people fanning him and so forth and acknowledging him. And here's the king. He's got a staff and so forth. Now, at that time, and he was, by the way, the greatest king at that time as far as all the empires in the region. Now the Jewish people had been taken captive sometime before by Babylon, the Babylonian Empire, and they were taken captive and brought halfway, essentially, to where King Xerxes ruled. And then the Persian Empire overran that Babylonian incursion, and they freed the Jews, some of whom went back to the land of Canaan, and some of whom stayed in Persia. And this story is about the Jews who stayed in Persia. And it may be why God's name is never mentioned in this book. The fact that, although the main character, you can read between the lines that he was a godly man, the main character being Mordecai, they had stayed for some of the pleasures and riches and happiness and so forth that they perceived they would have in Persia. So they were kind of outside of God's will at the time. And nonetheless, God wanted to preserve those people, and he does. He rescues them from death, from genocide. And here's how it unfolds. All right? King Xerxes, scene 1. Okay, he throws a big party. He was quite wealthy, and he loved to throw big parties. I'm going to read sometimes from the text, and tell you what's going on, okay? By the way, he ruled over, it says here in verse 1, 127 provinces, stretching from India to Cush. That's what I was showing you on the globe. And at that time, he had his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. In the 3rd year of his reign, he gives this big banquet for all of his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes of all of the provinces were present. So it's a giant party. And the actual word used in the Hebrew would denote that it was a drinking party. Okay, they like to party it up. Now, by the way, what he was doing with this party is he's trying to show off. He's got a big ego. Of course, we don't have any leaders like that now. Anyway, he's got a big ego, and he's showing off all his wealth. But there's a reason. He wants to do an invasion of Greece. He wants to do a military action against the Greco Empire. And he's trying to raise money for that from all of his provinces. So he's trying to impress them first with his wealth. By the way, his invasion was a disaster and came to a bad end. But anyway, he's throwing this party. And a full 180 days, so half a year, right? At the end of that party, he gave another banquet, an even, I guess, more special party, which lasted 7 days. And he did that in the enclosed garden of the king's palace. Now, to give you an idea of kind of like the kind of cups they would drink from, for example, that's the kind of mug they would drink their wine from. Solid gold, with big figures on it and things. That's a Persian, it's from his empire, from that era. Golden goblet, right? So that's some pretty heavy-duty drinking. Those guys must have been heavily soused, I don't know. But in any case, I guess they could hold their wine somewhat. Anyway, he gave this party in the enclosed garden of the king's palace, this big 7-day party that ended after the 6-month party. Let me give you an idea. Of course, we don't have photos of that, but they've done excavations and seen kind of what the garden looks like. It had all kinds of fountains and pools and water and vegetation and in the excavation. It reminds us somewhat of places like this. The Hearst Castle. That's the indoor pool at the Hearst Castle, which is on the Central California coast. Randolph Hearst, the big publishing magnate, built this huge mansion way up on a hill in a remote part of the Central California coast. Beautiful place to go. If you've never been there, you should go there. It's about maybe 30, 40 minutes, 45 minutes up the coast from San Luis Obispo. And just before the rugged and beautiful Big Sur coastline. Gorgeous area, ocean, terrain, prime spot to visit. Visit the town of Cambria, one of my favorite spots to hunt agates, by the way, when I used to live in California. And Jaspers was a little ways north of Cambria. But anyway, we were up at the Hearst Castle last year. Been there a couple times. This is the enclosed pool. And then outside, you have what would look somewhat like what King Xerxes had for his giant party. I took these photos myself while we were there. This isn't somebody's slide. So you get the idea. Rather ornate, and his guests would be all around here drinking from those golden goblets and partying it up, right? So, they're having their party. Oh, that terrible sound is the refrigerator. I've got to fix that sometime. The garden had hangings of blue linen and purple material, silver rings, gold and silver couches, mosaics of all kinds of things, costly stones, marble, whatever, giant goblets of gold, it says here in the text, in the book of Esther. In keeping with the king's liberality, he allowed every man to drink as much as they want. Okay? And it says here, now, down in verse 9, chapter 1, Queen Vashti, his beautiful queen, also gave a banquet for the women of the royal palace of King Xerxes. So they were in a separate area at the time. The women probably didn't want to hang around all those drunk guys, right? I don't know. Because it wasn't necessary for the genders to be separated. On the seventh day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from his wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, well, I won't go through all the names. Anyway, he said, go get Queen Vashti and bring her here. I want to display her beauty to all the guys and impress them, not just with my wealth and stuff, but with my beautiful queen. And the implication is he was going to display her probably half naked, if we understand what was going on at the time from other documents. So anyway, she comes in. He wanted to display her wearing her royal crown and display her beauty, etc. But when the attendants delivered the king's command to Queen Vashti, she had other ideas. She said, heck no, except that's not the words she used. She said, I'm not going to go in there with all those drunk guys, being disrespectful and making catcalls and be on display like some ornamental object of yours, possession, right? So she said no. The king became furious with anger. Now, it was customary, if he had a big problem, that he would consult with his top advisors. So he goes to them and says, what am I going to do about this problem? The queen refused me this request, and they said, tell you what, banish her so she can't be queen anymore. So that's what he did. He passed a law and signed it and said, away with you, Queen Vashti. You will no longer be the queen. All right, so she's banished from her position. But he starts missing having his queen after a while. He says, what am I going to do now? I have no queen, no beautiful woman to show off anymore as my wife and queen. So he consults his advisors again, and they say to him, let's see, how many provinces does he have? 127, I believe it is. Yes. They say, send out people to all the provinces and give them a message and say, we're going to hold a massive beauty contest and bring the winner of each province beauty contest to the city of Susa, and then we'll have a final beauty contest, right? And whoever's the winner of that will be your new queen, okay? So that's what they do. And enter now Mordecai, a Jew living in Susa at the time, along with many others, right? So, oh, by the way, let's backtrack a minute. His advisors, when they said you have to banish Queen Vashti, it's quite amusing what they said to him. They said, the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, all the wives of all of these princes and nobles, right? And they will despise their husbands and say, if Queen Vashti can get away with saying no to her husband, all of us are going to do the same, right? That's what they're worried about. And there will be no end to the disrespect and discord. That's what his advisors say to him. And so you have to do this banishment so that the women will not, get too uppity. Remember, this was a patriarchal age, okay? That's just how it was. And it was that way everywhere, not just in the Persian Empire. So, this is why they did it. Anyway, and they said, all the women, if you do this, they will continue to respect their husbands from the least to the greatest. So the king makes that law and stamps it with his signet ring, a seal on his finger that said, this is a law from the king. Now, this is important for later, once the king passes a law, it cannot be changed after that, not even by the king. So, that's the law of the land. It can't be changed. So that's why they make a search for all the beautiful young women in the kingdom. They go to all the provinces. Now, enter Mordecai, not our primary character. Our primary character is Esther. But Mordecai is a relative of Esther's, and she's living under his roof. That's her cousin. Esther's parents had been killed as part of the Babylonian captivity, and so he took her in. Mordecai, her relative, who's much older than her, took her in and was taking care of her. All right, now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Shimei, etc. He had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. That's who Xerxes ended up conquering, right? And among those taken captive with Jehoiakim, the king of Judah. Now Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, which is the Jewish name for Esther. She took two names. She was hiding her identity at the time she got brought to Susa, hiding her identity And no one knew that she was Jewish except Mordecai. So she was brought up by him because she had no father or mother. This is from the 2nd chapter of Esther. This girl, known as Esther, was lovely in form and features, and Mordecai had took her on as his own daughter when her father and mother died. So anyway, the girl pleased and won his favor. The king has this final beauty contest, right? And Esther gets prepared, as all the women do. Let's take a look. Oh, look, there's Esther there. Now, I don't think that's the real Esther, because they weren't doing painting quite this detailed at the time. But this is an artist's rendering, and she's getting her makeup done by a maiden, and all of that kind of thing. They go into it here in the text. The girls were brought to the citadel and put under the care of the top guy, and they were taken to the palace, and etc., etc. Now the girl pleased the king and won his favor, and immediately he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. Oh, I'm sorry. I told you wrong. It's the top guy that she pleased. The guy who's running the beauty contest, the top eunuch. Okay, he's not going to mess with anyone because he's a eunuch. And he assigned her 7 maids, etc. Esther had not revealed her nationality to anyone, okay, because Mordecai told her not to do so. He had forbidden her. All right, so every day he walked back and forth in the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening. All right, eventually what happens is, as we get down later in the chapter, that Esther found favor with everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women in the beauty contest. We don't do anything like that today, of course, because it's very sexist. So we don't have things like shows like The Bachelor, okay? We don't have that. But anyway, he was attracted to her more than any of the other women. And so he takes her into the royal residence. She won his favor. He set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. I feel kind of sorry for Vashti, don't you? I kind of do. But anyway, the king gave a great banquet. He's always giving drinking parties. But he gave a great banquet for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces, and he distributed gifts with royal liberality. All right, enter Mordecai, her cousin, who had acted as her father. Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. That's where people would hang out and talk about important things and that kind of thing. And he heard 2 of the king's officers, who were guards, talking about a conspiracy to assassinate King Xerxes. All right? And when he uncovered that plot, he has a message delivered to the king and tells him about it. And so the king foils the plot and has those conspirators put to death. This is going to be very important later in the story. All right? So remember that. Mordecai saves King Xerxes from a plot to kill the king. Now enter the villain. Think Scar from The Lion King. All right? This is the villain, Haman. Haman's plot to destroy the Jews, chapter 3 of the book of Esther. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman. It was like his right-hand man, his top guy, his Secretary of State and top advisor. He gave him a seat of honor higher than the other nobles. All the royal officials of the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman. For the king had commanded that concerning him, but Mordecai, who is only going to bow his knee to God alone, although it doesn't say that here in the text, that's what we understand from all kinds of other sources and so forth. Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Okay? Now when the royal officials asked Mordecai, why do you disobey the command? He refused to comply. So they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them that he was a Jew. So they knew Mordecai was a Jew. No one had any idea that Queen Esther was related to him other than Queen Esther. Okay? When Haman saw Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Haman had a big ego. Not this size ego, this size ego. Kind of like King Xerxes himself. In fact, I think Haman probably had designs on the royal throne himself. But anyway, Haman saw Mordecai would not bow down to him, take a knee. So he looked for a way not only to destroy Mordecai, but all of his people, the Jews, throughout the entire kingdom of Xerxes. He came to, what he did was, he thought, I am going to set a day. Now they like to use what they call lots, like dice. They call them pur, P-U-R. I'll show you what one looks like from that time. Looks a little different than the dice we have today. There's a pur right there, all right? And the pur, this is where we're ultimately going to get to the end of our story. This is how we come up with the Jewish holiday of Purim, is this pur. He cast this lot and said, I'm going to, wherever it falls, I'm going to choose that day. We'll let the pur tell us when I can have all the Jews killed. So he does that, and it fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar, and he selected a day and a month from the casting of the dice, the pur. So then Haman comes to King Xerxes and says, there is a certain people dispersed and scattered through the provinces of your kingdom, whose customs are different from those of others. Remember, King Xerxes is having trouble raising money for his various adventures. And I believe by now it's reached a point where he already had tried the invasion of Greece some years later, right? And it had failed. So he's trying to figure out how to raise more money. But anyway, evil Haman comes to him and says, now, if it pleases the king about this people that are dispersed all through these provinces, the Jews, let a decree be issued to destroy them. I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for the men who carry out this business. And we will take all of their property, etc., as plunder and enrich the king's, coffers and, so to speak, give him more budget. So the king took his signet ring from his finger, gave it to Haman, the Agagite, enemy of the Jews. Keep the money, the king said to Haman, and do with that people as you please. So he decided that, all right, sounds like a plan, Haman, go ahead. So on the 13th day of the month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out a script, they wrote out the law, the signet ring's signature was put on it, And the order was sent to all 127 provinces on such a day and such a month. All the Jews are to be killed on that day, right? They were sent by courier to all the king's provinces to annihilate all of the Jews, including the young, the old, the women, and the children, and all the plunder would be taken and all their goods to be brought back and administered by Haman and to the king, okay? So there's where we are. Sounds pretty bad for the Jews, doesn't it? So now Mordecai hears about this, of course. He's got his ear to the wall all the time, hanging out at the king's gate, or the city gate, listening to all the local gossip and news. And so Mordecai decides, I've got to do something to save not only myself, but the entire nation of Jews in exile here. So he learned all that had been done. He tore his clothes. This is Mordecai. Put on sackcloth and ashes, wailed loudly and bitterly. But he only went as far as the king's gate, couldn't come in. Now, Esther, of course, was keeping in touch through people she knew and so forth, what was going on with her adopted father, and heard about his unhappiness. She didn't know anything about this plot to annihilate the Jews yet. She hadn't heard about it. So she's wondering what's going on. So she sends him a message and says, why are you so upset? I've heard you're upset. And he sends her a message and says, there's this plot to kill me and all the nation of Jews, essentially your entire people and clan, and to take all their property. And he sent her a copy of the law so she would understand it. And he said, he told the messenger to urge her to go to the king's presence and beg for mercy and plead with the king about her people, the Jews. So Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. This is the messenger, right? And let's scroll down. Esther says, what am I going to do about this? So he went back and reported to Esther, and then she instructed him to say in reply to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the provinces know that if any man or woman approaches the king in the inner court, like you're asking me to do, without being summoned first by the king, there is but one law. They have to be put to death. She's reporting back to Mordecai through the messenger. Don't tell me to go to the king's inner court and beg for the people, because that just means I'll be put to death. The only exception, however, there is an exception, is if the king decides to extend the gold scepter to them and spare their life. But 30 days have passed since the last time I was called in to see the king. And so she's saying, look, he hasn't even called me to talk to me for a month, and you're asking me to go in there and risk my life, right? So when Esther's words were reported back to Mordecai, he sent her this answer down in chapter 4 now of Esther, okay? Chapter 4. He sends her this answer. Do not think, my young adopted daughter Esther, do not think that because you are in the king's house, that you alone of all the Jews are going to escape. Because if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. Will arise from another place. Interesting. He knows, he's thinking, you have to again read between the lines. He knows God's going to provide deliverance for the Jews, even if Esther won't help. So although God's not mentioned by name, you can see what's on Mordecai's mind. Because God has promised that he would always deliver the Jews from their captors. Do not think that you alone will escape. If you remain silent, relief will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for just such a time as this. You know, as I'm reading this, and as I'm doing this video, one of the reasons I picked this book and this topic is we're stuck in some very, very difficult times right now. We have riots going on as a result of a heinous incident that took place. We have the COVID virus, economic trouble, unemployment, all kinds of bad stuff. But I'm here to tell you that perhaps each and every one of us has been brought into a position and we have an ability to do something to improve our society and to help some others at just such a time as this. God's going to use the circumstances, the time, and the place. So he's speaking to Esther through her stepfather, not her stepfather, her adoptive father, Mordecai. Now when Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, she said to him, the message gets to her. You're not going to escape just because you're the queen. And so do you want to help? So Esther sent this reply, and this shows a lot of character on her part. She says, don't turn off right now. I have other things to show. She says, go gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. Now usually fasting is accompanied with prayer for the Jews, but notice she doesn't really say that. It may be implied though, so they're still holding on to a remnant of their faith, although they're not in right relationship back in their homeland. I and my maids will fast for those 3 days as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, like you asked, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. She's become a very brave young woman, hasn't she? She says, you're right. It's the right thing to do. And if I die, I die. Okay? So Mordecai went away, and he carried out Esther's instructions. Now we've been going about 40 minutes. So I'm going to have to split this into 2 videos, or my voice will die and go hoarse. Right? But I promise you, you don't want to stop here. Tune in again for the next video when we do part 2, which will be, I believe, the final part of this book of Esther, because I think you'll enjoy the outcome. All right. We're on the edge of our seat to see if there's going to be an annihilation and what's going to happen with the evil Haman. What's going to happen with the beautiful Queen Esther? How about King Xerxes and Mordecai, all our principal characters? So I hope that you were relaxed by this video, and don't ASMR and drive, as they always say. See you in the next installment. Bye-bye for now.